Right now, I want to welcome to the show our friend Rick Ector of Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit. Rick, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Cam, I'm doing great, man. How are you and the guys?
We are excellent. Appreciate you coming on the program this afternoon. And you're actually quoted in a story at The Guardian, which is it's a very far left-leaning news site published out in England. The headline, Police Tell Detroiters to Buy Guns in City Riven by Race Issues and Crime. City Police Chief has encouraged residents to arm themselves as stark racial disparities in shoot first laws become clear. So that's the tone there of the headline. But I got to say, Rick, the article itself is not awful.
It's not awful per se. I mean, I really have took issue with the story itself based on the fact that, the way it was sold to me. Last weekend, I was doing my annual community service event, and it started out kind of small 2 years ago where I trained 50 ladies for free, at a local gun range that donated their facility, free instruction, range time, ammo, gun rental, the whole thing. And this year it got to be a much bigger deal. I had over 200 ladies that received a free shooting lesson. So I got a call out of Washington, D.C., well, at least the number, area code 202. And she said she had heard about my program and that she wanted to come out and see what was going on and talk to some of the ladies that was there. So I was really under the impression that it was an article about our big community service event. I had no idea it was going to be, this far-reaching, article that was going to, take a shot at concealed carry and caring for, personal protection. And because, the story about the police chief was kind of stale by now. Everyone in the country pretty much knows that the police chief supports law-abiding citizens carrying guns for personal protection. So when I saw that little piece where she quoted that researcher whose conclusions was that, that black people don't really fare too well with stand your ground laws, I was really disappointed. But, as I talked with a couple of my friends, they were like, well, hey, what did you expect to talk to the Guardian? You should have expected, something a little unforward to come out of it. But, like you said, the article wasn't awful per se, but I just think I'll be a little more selective with what news organizations I talk to in the future.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I thought there was there were some good parts of this story, as you say. The people who wrote this story or the website, I don't know the author's name. Look, they're anti-gun. They think what you're doing is weird. They think what you're doing is kind of awful, but they still allowed some stories to be told. I thought it was interesting, the story of Tanisha Moner, 37 years old. When she was 17, she was raped. She was robbed at gunpoint at a payphone in Detroit. 4 years later, The Guardian writes, when she's 21, she was attending Wayne State University, working as a manager at a Burger King. She's counting money in the Burger King office, and she's robbed again at gunpoint, left in the restaurant's freezer. And for a long time, she said that she was terrified of firearms. And then 2 years ago, she said, finally 2 years ago, I said, I'm either going to let my fear overcome me or I'm going to beat my fear. So I got my concealed carry license in the event that something else should ever happen. Like, to me, I thought that's a great story. And it really humanizes the fact that, these are real people who are...
Is a real story. I didn't know about the rape until the article that came out, but I do remember her taking my concealed carry class a couple of years ago, and she's an excellent shooter now. She regularly posts her silhouettes on Facebook, and they're awesome. And she recently took my range safety officer class, and now she's an NRA RSO, and she has aspirations to be an instructor. So she's really came, from surviving a violent attack to owning her personal protection and wanting to help other people.
That is amazing. And your story as well, Rick. We talk a lot about what you are doing to train people and to, be safe and responsible around firearms, to know how to protect yourself. But you too were very, as the Guardian says, were ambivalent about firearms. You were not a gun person until you were carjacked in your driveway.
Yeah, man. I wasn't anti-gun. I was just, like you said, ambivalent. I really had, to me, it never was something I really needed to be concerned with. A family guy, lived in a decent neighborhood, didn't hang out at night, went to work and came home. But, circumstances happened that I had a rude awakening. Fortunately for me, I survived, and I wanted to, completely own my personal protection. And, now I'm a firearms instructor, training counselor, out giving free shooting lessons to women in the community. So, it's funny how life goes sometimes.
No kidding. And look, in Detroit, it seems to me like we're going to find that these stories are pretty common. People who may not have thought about firearms, may have been anti-gun, but when you are the victim of a crime, when all of a sudden it's very, very personal, it's not a hypothetical for you, and you're in that situation. It's not just Detroit. I mean, I remember in Cleveland, there was a state lawmaker who had voted against right to carry when it was up in Colorado the first year. And a few years after that, he's going on his nightly walk around his neighborhood, and he's robbed right outside of his house. And he said, the light went on at that moment. I realized I want a gun to be able to protect myself. And he started, he not only did he get his concealed carry license, but he talked to people in his neighborhood, and they sent a whole bunch of people from the neighborhood to get their concealed carry licenses. This, look, it is, self-defense is a right. It may not be something that we all think about, but just because we're not exercising it doesn't mean that we don't have the right to do so, that we don't have the right to say, all right, now I've decided I do want to exercise that right.
I concur 100%, man. The right to self-defense, it could also translate into the right not to protect yourself. But you know what? If for whatever reason not protecting yourself or not having a means of defending yourself, doesn't make sense to you, then, fine, great, don't do it. But at least don't stand in the way of other people who are in different situations and different circumstances, who have a desire to protect themselves and their families. And for some of us, it takes, unfortunately, having a negative event to show you that it's relevant and that it could be of some use to you to be safe in our society.
There's a quote in this piece, a gentleman, last name of Roman, who said that he quote, I think it's a disaster. He says, how do you grow a city when you say to people who are thinking about moving there, when you move here, bring a weapon? Who's going to want to move there, he says. So let me ask you, Rick, first of all, do you think that people who live in Detroit should own firearms if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want a gun, you should be able to have one. No argument there.
John Roman is a senior fellow at the Urban Institute. He says, who's going to want to move here if the thinking is, well, when you move here, bring a weapon. It seems to me that Rick, that's kind of insulting. That if it's all your fault, Rick, why people don't want to move here, that if you simply, and Chief Craig, if you guys would just stop talking about, the need to protect yourself, then more people would move to Detroit because they would be unaware of the fact that crime is bad and that, people do need firearms to protect themselves, and many people are choosing to take that option. I think most people who would be moving to Detroit are well aware of the problems that Detroit's facing right now.
I mean, yeah, we definitely have our problems. We definitely have our challenges. And yeah, you know what? The city is not 100% safe. But then again, no place in the country is 100% safe. If you want to carry a firearm for personal protection, by all means, you should be able to do that. But I think it's disingenuous for certain people to assume that good people with guns is the reason why we have violent crime, in our society and in our city. I agree with you 100% there.
So, I guess one final question. I mean, what if the people who are moving to Detroit right now, Rick, and you'd be in a better position to judge this than me, but what if the people who are moving to Detroit, the people who are, maybe returning home, or they recognize that there are opportunities. They want to see Detroit turn around. What if they're the type of people who are okay with owning firearms for self-defense? I mean, what if that's the type of people that Detroit is attracting? Folks who understand that the police can't be everywhere at one time. There are tens of millions of people all across the United States who know this. Are those the type of folks who are more likely to move to Detroit? Maybe more self-sufficient folks who see opportunity in your city.
I certainly hope so. I'm not going to not welcome anyone who doesn't own a gun, but you know what? If you're a good citizen and you happen to be a homeowner and you have guns, man, I want you to live next door to me. I want you in my neighborhood, and I want you in my community. The fact that, there's nothing wrong with good people owning firearms, and I welcome them into the city, and I welcome them into our community.
Yeah, I just remember a story I read. I think it was last year. It was probably about a year ago, and it was one of those first person reporting stories. And it was a young guy who had bought a house in Detroit. I think he bought it for $1 at auction. Maybe it was like $500, but it was one of these houses that the city is selling off dirt cheap, and he bought it, and he decided he wanted to move in and start renovating it so he could live there. And within probably 2 or 3 weeks, he had also bought a shotgun for self-defense. And this was something he had not really thought about, but he realized pretty quickly, yep, I do need to be able to protect myself. And, there were no regrets. There was no existential angst. There was no hand-wringing over this. It was just his decision. He had decided, yeah, I'm not a gun owner, never have been a gun owner, but I want to be able to protect myself. And here I am, owning a shotgun. I wonder if we're not seeing more of those types of people. I think it does take, I think it takes a special type of person to look at a house that's fallen apart, maybe in a neighborhood that is running down, and to see the potential, to see what you can make of that house and how you can restore and rebuild. I think it takes somebody with imagination. I think it takes somebody with perseverance, and I think it takes somebody who's got that spark of self-sufficiency. And I just think those are character traits that lend themselves well to gun ownership as well.
Well, I mean, yeah, the city right now, it's definitely at a low point, but you know what? It can't get much worse than it is right now. And when you look at some of the neighborhoods and some of the communities, I mean, literally there are some blocks where there's only 1 or 2 homes on a block in some areas. And you know what? Let's face it, there's some places that have their challenges crime-wise and, may not have the best of response time. And you know what? We need some people to come into the city who want to take up residency and become positive citizens in the city. And you know what? It might take those people to have a little more ownership of their personal safety. By all means, those are the type of people I personally would like to see come in the city.
Rick, listen, man, I'm glad you're there, and I think Detroit is lucky to have you. I appreciate you coming on the program, and I look forward to doing this again soon, man.
Hey, man, it's always a pleasure. Love being on the show. Give Cam, Pop, and Eric my best.
I certainly will. Rick Ector joins from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit.